We have seen the emergence of what I call modern Internet of Things. It is rich in data. It can bring in location.
It's really the connectivity piece and the data aggregation piece that is usually missing in the infrastructure right now in the market.
If you have a large farm, the wireless connectivity is not going to carry out.
This is the Industrial IoT Podcast, your B2B show for the best thought leadership in the industry, bringing you education, information, and inspiration, only on market scale. Network looks stable. Let's connect.
Welcome to another episode of the Market Scale IoT Podcast. I'm your host today, Tyler Kern. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode of the show. Got two great features coming up on the show for you today. The first of which is with Trevor Fischbach. He's the president of StarChase. And what StarChase does is they provide pursuit management and GPS tracking technology to public safety and government agencies worldwide. They have a variety of different devices and ways that they do that. Also involved in what they do is they collect a lot of data, so they know a ton about high-speed chases, and what they're really trying to do is save lives and keep people safe, as well as save insurance money and save money and that sort of thing. So they do a lot of great work. It's going to be a really interesting conversation of how they've really taken GPS and IoT and converted it into something that is able to keep people safe and be utilized by law enforcement. So it's a really interesting conversation. I think that's going to be a great one to kick off the show today. After that, we're going to have a conversation with Philippe Vigneault. He's the VP of Business Development for Transitel, and we had this conversation with him at CES in Las Vegas last week, and we're going to talk to him about shedding light on why car manufacturers are moving to become telecom players in order to provide car connectivity services. So that's another interesting conversation to have, just how car manufacturers are really moving into a different space as technology moves forward. They're no longer just making cars that drive. You got to make cars that are able to be connected in so many different ways. And so it's going to be a really good conversation with Philippe Vigneault of Transitel as well. So two awesome conversations coming up on the show today. I can't wait to dive into all of the great content that we have for you on today's Market Scale Industrial IoT Podcast. Without further ado, let's get to that conversation with Trevor Fischbach. He is the president of StarChase, coming up next on the Market Scale IoT Podcast. Joining me now on the Industrial IoT Podcast presented by Market Scale is Trevor Fischbach. He's the president of StarChase. StarChase provides pursuit management and GPS tracking technology to public safety and government agencies worldwide. Trevor, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you, Tyler. It's great to be here.
It's really great to talk to you, and StarChase is just a really unique company. I haven't really seen anybody doing what you guys are doing. So I'm curious, just from the get-go, where did the idea for StarChase come from?
In a way, it actually came from law enforcement. So, several years back, I was talking with an officer up in the Northeast, and he was basically detailing what kind of tools they had to deal with pursuits back then. And this goes several years back. And I was kind of left with the feeling, and we talked about things like tire deflation and just the overall, like everybody sees on TV or whatever, the overall dangers associated with just a traditional high-speed pursuit. And that was kind of the focal point of our conversation. And also the fact that they just were limited on the tools to deal with these kinds of events. So, back when I was having the conversation, it was tire deflation was just making an inroad into law enforcement, and that's obviously self-explanatory. It's where the officer throws a strip of nails, if you will, across the road, and hope that the suspect runs over them and flattens the tires and slows down the events. So, there's still a lot of good things that can happen from that. If everything works the way everyone wants it to, which is to just safely stop the pursuit. Sadly, there's been a lot of incidents where, these events have taken officers' lives just using that tool. And that's certainly not a direction I wanted to head with creating a technology that would help law enforcement. So basically it came out of an early conversation. And what I mainly thought about, because I come from a technology background, is really GPS and what we have today, which is basically a system that allows law enforcement to either from their vehicle or from a handheld device to launch a GPS tag onto a suspect vehicle or a vehicle of interest, and safely track it, and basically not engage in the traditional high-speed pursuit sort of tactics that everybody's aware of that happens every day on the streets.
Absolutely. You mentioned just the ability to keep officers safe in that case. And it also, even if we're able to keep everybody safe, it also has the added benefit of saving money and that sort of thing, just preventing damage either to other property or to other cars and other motorists and that sort of thing. So there are multiple different benefits to being able to employ this technology.
Yeah, you're right on, Tyler. It is, unbeknownst to a lot of people, we're looking at, pursuits overall. It's a multi-billion-dollar problem, and that's billion, not million. It's an incredible drain on economies, and it's sort of this sometimes silent drain on the economies, either locally or even statewide, when they have to make these large settlements or lawsuits, or they lose officers, tragically in these pursuits, or you lose innocent lives. The other thing that sometimes isn't spoken about enough is the injuries that occur from high-speed pursuits, and those are in the multiple thousands annually as far as injuries. Upwards of 7,500 annually. People are injured as a result of high-speed related activities, and the economics of it all is sadly that obviously you certainly don't want to lose a life, but the injuries are often, from an economic standpoint, as expensive or more expensive long term from an economic standpoint. Obviously, from the loss of life, it's a tragedy for everybody involved. So from a savings standpoint, there's a lot of work to be done. But we are confident, and we have basically under our belt. We're very proud. We achieved 10,000 tags in 2018. And from my perspective, every single one of those tags is a chance to save a life. And if you want to extrapolate that out into economics, it's also saving money. So not only does it save the agency money, but you can forecast that out further to the local, state, and national level as far as money is saved, because you're not having all this lost productivity from these individuals that have been impacted by a negative outcome of a pursuit, and that includes the innocent lives that are lost, like people like you and I that are just going about our daily business, and all of a sudden your life is over, or you're in a wheelchair for the rest of your life because of a completely uninvolved situation that just changed the path of your life completely.
Absolutely, and that's a great way of putting it. Just that innocent bystanders are frequently affected by these type of events all the time. So when I watched the video of the demonstration of how StarChase works, I think if I watched that 5 years ago, I would have thought, this is Mission Impossible level stuff that I didn't know could exist, but it does. So can you just explain maybe the technologies that are employed from top to bottom, everything from the device that gets launched to how that is activated and launched from the police vehicle onto the vehicle that's being pursued, and just kind of everything in between?
Absolutely. Thanks, Tyler. And you're right. Several years ago, the technology wasn't even possible. And I know clearly everybody listening knows about the events from 9/11. And I was living in that area at the time. And when I think back to 9/11 and then the succeeding years from that, very quickly you realize that your phone now had GPS in it. And, all the GPS that we count on these days, I sadly think came somewhat out of those types of events, because we just didn't have a way of tracking things, people, or events. And with the advent of much smaller components, that gave rise to this technology being able to even be possible. Back when we initially started the development of the technology, it was about the size of a basketball, and then very quickly, and that was during the patent process and everything. But very quickly after 9/11, sadly, technology certainly took a much faster pace, and then miniaturization came into effect. And StarChase, we did benefit with that from being able to build a small footprint GPS device. And today we leverage your common cellular providers worldwide. We have agencies worldwide that use the technology, so we have to move with what's available in those markets as far as connectivity. We also add our own security to those connections where we can, and rely heavily on cloud services to store our data, process our transactions, and basically keep ourselves at a 99.9% uptime, if you will, on availability for our agency users that use the technology.
How have those advancements in cloud technology really enabled you to do what you do? I know that has been really important for lots of different industries and for lots of different companies, just being able to use that technology to kind of have instantaneous benefits and instantaneous response times, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. I think you could apply a lot of the benefits that we see, like you said, to a lot of other industries as well. And just the fact that we can distribute out, in a cloud way, a lot of our data requirements and needs and response times. It gives us the ability to to move better, more efficiently, and more quickly into different markets. We manage our data and our redundancy through a lot of secure, a lot of our secure cloud services that we utilize today. And the overall data collection and the management of that data. While we may not keep everything in the cloud just because of the sheer size of it, as I mentioned earlier, with 10,000 tags, you can imagine the amount of data that we've been collecting on basically the behaviors of these events. And that's a critical piece that I'd love to get into with you on this talk today.
Yeah, so you're talking about all of the different and the variety of data that you're collecting on a regular basis. How are you able to then take that and use that for other means, whether it's the movement of police vehicles and officers? How are you then able to take that and apply that in other situations that are keeping officers safe?
Well, the data is almost important. All these events obviously create data. And I mentioned earlier about the 10,000 tags. So you can imagine the sheer amount and volume of data that we have on everything from, speed, direction of travel, location. What we can also draw, and what we're also beginning to be able to draw, is some predictive analytics, if you will, off of those data sets that we have. Because it's a very specific data set. It's a data set. It's a law enforcement focused data set. It's a suspect, the person that they're tracking, focused data set, and having all those variables, being able to apply, understand all the variables that are in that space, in the law enforcement public safety space. We're able to create almost predictive analytics out of that whole data set, and that's it's exciting for us to be able to provide reports to our agencies, a myriad of reports on everything from speed and direction, but also being able to sort of extrapolate out the behavior of the people involved during those events as well. Because with high-speed pursuits, it's not only a physical event, but there's a lot of behavioral things happening too. You have human beings on both sides of the spectrum. You have the good guy and you have the perceived bad guy, and there's human behavior obviously linked into all that. And one of the biggest things is being able to identify ways to alter that behavior to affect a much safer event or outcome. And our technology over the years has been proving that we can be part of that challenge and part of that solution. And the data sets, show that. So that's part of, when agencies move forward with StarChase, they realize that it can not only does it change the actual dynamics physically of the pursuit environment, but it also can minimize the adrenaline and the risk that's associated.
That's really interesting, and I know that that people like you, Trevor, are constantly thinking if there is one officer or innocent bystander's life who is kind of put into harm's way by these types of pursuits, that's one too many. So you're always thinking, okay, what's the next thing? Well, how can we continue to improve upon our product and improve upon what we do, and continue kind of innovating in this space? So is that the biggest thing that you see moving forward, or are there other innovations that you see that you think I'd really like to dive into this area and see what we can do in this space?
Yeah, I think, and we're beginning that now. We have we do have as I mentioned, we have the vehicle mounted system, and then we have the handheld system, and then we also have the data and everything that lies under that, all the mapping that we've developed that law enforcement uses. I sort of talk about that under as software as a service, the SaaS model, the IoT. It falls obviously into the IoT family of things. But another product value add that we've added is the ability for an agency, really law enforcement or first responder type agency, to be able to monitor everything from their vehicles to actually their people out on the street. You call it their front line. And what we've done is we've developed a lot of very smart application actually that runs on all the devices that law enforcement uses today. Smartphones, smart pads, connected data terminals in the vehicles, broadband connected data terminals, MDTs, if you will, mobile data terminals that they coin for law enforcement. Simply put, laptops. And our AppTrack 365 runs on all of those devices, and it's out there collecting even more data on the activities of that agency or of that or multiple agencies at once that, let's say, are cross jurisdictional and they want to share data amongst each other and be able to see different types of trends that they couldn't get really into focus previously without being, if you can't see really where your people are, obviously when they're on shift, it's hard to be able to go look back and do any kind of historical trending on how to either improve policing, or even in real time being able to take a resource set that you have, people, and be able to move them efficiently to a specific event.
Right.
And with the AppTrack 365, you're able to do that because you can see in real time basically where all your people are on patrol. So if you have an event in the East Sector, you could very quickly garner the resources that you need and redirect specific resources to that event versus putting out an all call or what have you, as traditionally is done, where they get an officer down and you have every single officer, and for rightfully so. I'm not saying that shouldn't happen, but in traditional sense with the radio, all you hear is officer down, and every single officer in that area, not even in that area, every single officer that's with that agency is going to fly to that scene because that's what happens. Right. In an officer down example, or in a protest, or in a say home invasion in progress type thing, you're able to, with an AppTrack 365 product, be able to look at your closest assets and move them efficiently to that scene versus having folks from all the way across on a patrol zone come speeding across town to get somewhere where you can get basically the same impact with a set of folks that are in a set territory.
Absolutely. It's giving agencies the ability to utilize their resources to the best of their ability, and I think that's really invaluable information.
Yeah, and that's our goal, and it's to continue to bring leading edge technology solutions to law enforcement, not things that I'm not interested in delivering anything to law enforcement that they don't need, and that they haven't spoken about needing. So, because we talk with law enforcement daily, my team and I, and every product that we currently supply to law enforcement is a product that has been requested. And that's exciting that we have very close ties with everything from the command level down to patrol, and we listen to every piece of input that we get from our clients or from our agencies, And over the years, we've been able to develop very specific products for the problems that they face. I would say the Abstract 365 is a little bit of a broader kind of approach to help enable an agency at a broad level be able to get a global view on what's happening within their force. And the nice thing about that product is, it doesn't require new equipment, which agencies, are constantly spending money on new equipment to solve an issue or solve a problem. And with this approach, it leverages equipment that they already have and they've already, either paid for or it deploys out with equipment that's going out, into the new vehicles or what have you. So it's a very cost-effective solution that really brings a lot to offer as far as visibility into an agency.
And you're currently in 40 states, if I read correctly, 40 states and growing, correct?
We are in 40 states. We're up in Canada, and we're also abroad.
Very awesome. So that is Trevor Fischbach. He is the president of StarChase. They're providing pursuit management and GPS tracking technology to public safety and government agencies worldwide. But as you've heard, they do a lot more, and it's giving officers all of the tools that they need to best do their jobs. Trevor, thank you so much for joining me here on the IoT podcast today.
Thank you very much, Tyler.